Last week, Boston College lost a commitment, but they've already added 2 new defensive linemen over the weekend after a busy weekend on campus. We're going to talk about why these guys are exciting, what they're going to bring to Boston College, and what they mean to the class of 2023. All of this and more on today's Locked On Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by StatHero. StatHero is reshaping the way you play fantasy football and fantasy sports. Dozens of house-based games to play daily. No sharks, no funky props, just your skill versus the lineups you choose. Sign up today at stathero.com/lockedon. On today's show, as I said, we're going to talk about recruiting. I'm going to talk about coaching and look at the landscape of coaching around campus. I'm going to talk about what coach I think will be the next to be replaced. And finally, we're going to end our episode talking about George Takacs' transfer to Boston College and what that means to the team. We'll get into all of that today. So let's kick it off, though. Mitch is going to come on later. We're going to start off by talking recruiting, as Boston College football had a very busy weekend on campus where over the last month or so, you may have seen other teams starting to rev up on their recruiting trail moves with visits and all sorts of good stuff. But Boston College over the last couple of weeks has been really quiet. And the reason why is pretty simple. The school was on break. The players were on break, so they weren't there to host. There were no practices to see, and the campus was dead. Why would you bring anyone on campus for that? Well, now the kids are back. The team is back practicing. And over the weekend, Boston College had probably over a dozen players that I know of on campus to visit Chestnut Hill. And of those 12 or so players that already came on campus, 2 have already committed to Boston College. So over the weekend, the first name that popped was Jordan Mayer, a 6'4" defensive end from Thomas Jefferson High School in Pennsylvania. He checked out the campus earlier this spring, as last year as well. He was there last June. I've spoken to him a couple times. I'll have another interview with him up on the site today for premium users. You can check that out. But you know, you look at him, you look at his size. He's 2'4", 240. He's got the perfect build to be a ACC defensive end, explosive. I loved his film. If you watch his film, you see exactly what Halfley has went out for. Now, for some of you who are looking at it going, why is he not a 4? Why are we already getting guys that are not 4 stars? His offer list isn't impressive. I mean, he has offers from West Virginia, Duke, Rutgers, and a bunch of MAC schools. Here's the deal with Jordan Mayer. Mayer was someone Boston College got in real early with. And that's what you're starting to see with Halfley, right? Kids that BC put the work in early, that they got on campus, that they started to, have those conversations before like their senior and junior year, right? Now Mayer is making his decision. He's going to go, a lot of kids are going to go with the team that they have the best relationship with. Relationships are important. So BC evaluated this kid. They thought he was what they wanted, and they pulled the trigger on it. Now, yes, he doesn't have the huge offer list that like some of you fall in love with, but this goes back to, do you trust Jeff Halfley's ability to evaluate and assess recruits? If your answer is yes, then you will trust that Jordan Mayer is going to be what you're looking for, that he's going to be a strong defensive end, and I think he is. He's got good length. He's explosive, as I said. He's got what you want. But if you're worried about that, if you don't trust Halfley yet, then yeah, I get it. I'm not in that camp though. I think he and his staff are good evaluators of talent. You get in with these kids early and get the offers in, and you kind of help guide them to your school a little bit, if you want to call it that. Then that is exactly what BC just did. And I think it was the right move, and I think it's a good get for them, especially after they had just lost Boubacar Traore of Catholic Memorial, who decommitted last week. For those of you as well who, and this is, I'm telling you, I am not doing this just because he decommitted from BC. If you're looking at the star rankings with him, don't fall in love with what Treyarch was, because he is not as impressive on film as what you think he could be. And so, yeah, you would want him on the team, but some of these other guys that they got coming in, I think are going to be just fine. Okay. So BC has a defensive end. Now the second name that popped was within like 5 minutes of each other. And I have to say, Joe Sullivan doesn't work in that section of BC anymore. If you follow BC on Twitter, you know he's the guy with the Rick Ross GIFs. I've mentioned that a bunch of times. They got a whole bunch of new guys on there, and I missed the GIF game. I mean, I knew about some of these commitments beforehand, and but I just loved it. I love seeing the Rick Ross thing. It would bring up a level of excitement. I hope the new guys, I think it's Jason Tudrian, is the new Joe Sullivan, figures out something. He was just quiet. I didn't see anything. But it's just a way to kind of rev up the fans. So that was another one. And so the second name to pop was defensive lineman Eryx Daugherty. And Eryx is spelled Eryx. Never seen a name spelled like that before. He's from Michigan. He's interesting, and I'm curious to see how Hafley uses him, because I have every intention looking at him that he's going to be a defensive tackle, excuse me. He's going to be a defensive tackle. He's, 6'4", 270 right now. I mean, as you just saw, as I said with Jordan Mayer, most defensive ends are like 240. So he's got the build of a defensive tackle, excuse me. Keeps saying that, defensive tackle. And his speed. I mean, his speed is not what you want in an ACC defensive end. It would be fine for a defensive tackle. He runs a 4.8 40. But again, another guy you're going to have to hope. These are kind of the guys that you're going to hope that are that they like the film, right? That he doesn't have a huge offer list. I don't think he has any Power 5 offers, if I remember correctly. No, he has Maryland and a bunch of MAC schools. I don't know. Again, I want to see, we have not gotten a chance to see how a lot of Hafley's defensive recruits kind of, especially on the defensive line, how they're going to pan out. I know Donovan Azaraku is going to be probably a big one to watch this year, and you're going to see some more on the defensive, at the defensive tackle position probably jump up. But, this one is one you're going to have to kind of trust their evaluations. And, again, his film is impressive. It's good, but he's not a big name recruit, and I get that. But you know what though? When you look at a Jordan Mayer and you look at an Eryx Daugherty, remember that with them come a bunch of other guys that they're looking at that do have huge offer lists. There's a bunch of other recruits that they're going after that have, 15 big offers. They're borderline 4 stars. So it's not like they're just going after those guys. I think they're targeting a few names that I think they can land. I mean, they got Clive Wilson last year. That was one name he was completely off the radar, and I know the staff was like raving about him. So these are just two newer names that are just kind of unknowns for a lot of different people. So, as I said, there were 12 names that were there. A couple of them were already committed. Jacoby Robinson, the new quarterback, was on campus. You could see a picture of him on his Twitter account with John McNulty, the Boston College offensive coordinator. Jaden Skeet, who is part of what used to be the Catholic Memorial Trio. Now it's a duo. He's with Dontrell Jones, also from CM. He was there. There was a bunch of other guys as well. So check out BC Bulletin. I know a bunch of you have started to add premium subscriptions. We are, going crazy with trying to get as much recruiting info out to you guys as often as possible. So if you join, it's just $1 for the first month. It's a really good deal. You also get access to our Discord channel, which I know a lot of folks really enjoy, and our premium boards, which are blowing up on Maroon and Gold Forum. So if you do that and sign up and go to Maroon and Gold Forums, just find me on the site. You can send me a direct message, and I will activate your premium service on there as well. Now, in a moment, I'm going to talk coaches, and Boston College has already replaced their two main sports, men's football and men's basketball, over the last couple years. But what will be the next coaching change that Boston College could make? I'll tell you who it probably will be and why in just a moment. Now, man, do I love March Madness, but man, anyone else take Kentucky or Baylor and now your back bracket's busted? Yeah, mine's not looking too good, but I still got some cash from my StatHero pick'em. If you haven't checked out this new platform, you're really missing out. StatHero's NCAA single-game pick'ems pit the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players you know best with the gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. StatHero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you're going up against. They simply post a pickup set of players for you to take or on one side with a set you can choose. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to set your sports action fix. Simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. Now go to stathero.com/lockedon and use promo code LOCKEDON for 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon and use promo code LOCKEDON for 100% percentage match. stathero.com/lockedon, promo code LOCKEDON. Terms and conditions do apply. Now, if you're like me, your New Year's resolution is bust. I'm sticking to mine though because I'm decided to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs yet? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best tasting Built Bar products. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallows. Can you believe that? A protein infused marshmallow, but they're delicious. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They are a treat, and they're covered in 100% chocolate. A marshmallow covered in chocolate that's filled with protein. How can you miss on this? All Built Bars are 100% covered in chocolate, just like the Puffs, with cinnamony, churro, coconut, marshmallow, banana cream pie. They are so good. All you need to do is head to Built.com and scroll down their macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carb. Absolutely great. And the flavors are amazing. With mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If you think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good to you. Offer, head over to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for their 15% off offer at Built.com. Welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black. I am the editor of bcbulletin.com. We have some great stuff up there this week, and later on I will talk to Mitch Wolfe, who will have some even better stuff that you're going to really enjoy heading into the NFL draft season. But this isn't about the draft right now. I want to talk about the state of coaching at Boston College. Now, over the last 3 years, Boston College has made 2 major hires. They hired Jeff Hafley out of Ohio State, the former defensive coordinator, as the new football head coach. And, you know, the product on the field has been exciting. Has it been better? We haven't seen the results yet. That is what it is, right? Then we saw Earl Grant replace Jim Christian last season. And while there was no expectations with Grant because no one knew really who he was, and there weren't really high expectations given that he didn't have a strong track record, he kind of exceeded his expectations his first year, including a 2-game run in the ACC tournament, almost a 3-game, where BC really started to put together something special. They're starting to show some culture. They're starting to show a lot of grit going into next season. So they have that. Now, my question heading into this segment is who will be the next coach to be replaced? And there is a row of options that could be the next coach, and it could be anybody. Right now, I don't think that, maybe other than, Acadia Walker Einstein, the lacrosse coach, I would think any other coach could possibly leave. So let's go through the list, and I'll tell you why or why not they could leave. First up, Jeff Hafley. He could definitely be, if he has a strong next season, say BC goes 10-2 and becomes the darling of the ACC, they go on a Pitt or Wake Forest type run. We've all talked about this. We've talked about it a million times on this podcast. I get yelled at by a lot of the listeners from talking about it too much, but he could be. That could be one. Another could be Earl Grant, and that one could be even sooner than what you expect. I've heard buzz, and I said it on the podcast, reasonable buzz and people with connections have told me he is a candidate for the South Carolina job. Will he get it, though? I'll talk about that in a second. The others, you have Jerry York. He's 75 years of age. You had a tough season for BC hockey. You have Joanna McNamee. Now, Joanna McNamee is the women's basketball coach, but I already saw, I had this radar when I hear something, and I'm like, that makes sense. West Virginia's head coach for women's basketball just retired, and Joanna McNamee is from West Virginia. She coached at West Virginia on 2 separate occasions. She went to college in West Virginia, not at WVU, but she's from that area. Makes sense too. Then there is Mike Gambino. Mike Gambino is the baseball head coach, and the baseball team is again struggling like last year. So who is my thoughts? I will eliminate each one at a time, and I'll give you why each one. I'll leave with my pick. Okay, Jeff Halfley. I don't think BC's going to go 10-2 next year. I think they'll probably, for me, their top will be 9-3. And even if they do, I don't think he's going to leave for at least another 2 to 3 years. So that kind of eliminates him. I don't think he's a hot enough name to get pulled from BC yet. He will, I think, if he can improve some of the play on the field. I just don't see that happening with him. Earl Grant with South Carolina. Now, his name has been linked to South Carolina, but so have been a lot of other names. And the more and more I hear these other names, I don't think it's going to be him. The most recent name is Lamont Paris. I've heard BJ Mackey from Wake Forest. I have a hard time believing a second Power 5 team, especially one in the SEC, is going to take a chance on a guy that just went 13-20. Now, Boston College fans are ecstatic with the 13-20 because there was no expectations heading into that year. But can you imagine another program like saying that? That sounds okay. I just don't see it. I don't think Grant will be that. Let's also eliminate Jerry York. I get the sense with York that he's not going anywhere. Just listening to him talk, he's coached for such a long time. I imagine that when he is going to retire, he's going to have one of, not like a Coach K kind of farewell tours, but one where he kind of announces at the beginning of the year and just says it's coming. And then that way he can groom his replacements, hire his replacement, work that on the recruiting trails. Even though he's 75 and the results weren't there this year, I don't think it's going to be him. I think that, that'll be it. Joanna McNamee has been coaching on a team that has been a borderline NCAA tournament team for 2 out of the last 3 years. WVU was 15-15 last year in a not very good Big 12 conference. I don't see her leaving at the ACC, right? I mean, she gets to go back closer to home, but it seems like a lateral move to me. So unless WVU is like serious about really increasing her pay, I don't see her doing it. The numbers don't line up for me. And then, so that leaves my choice of who the next coach to be replaced is, and that is Mike Gambino. A nice guy. Like, I hate getting to know some of these coaches and sitting in press conferences and hearing them talk. You hate hearing this, but it's just the nature of the beast. You know what I mean? So last year, the BC was terrible. They were near the bottom of the ACC. They didn't even make the ACC tournament. They were that bad. They're bad this year. I mean, their pitching staff is really bad. They have a team ERA right now of 8.18. That is, they just got swept by UVA in a series where they weren't really all that close. And it was because of the pitching staff. They lost by, multiple scores. I think they let up double-digit scores in 2 of the 3 games. They let up 16 on Sunday, 18 on Saturday, and 7 on Friday, where they were actually in that game, but then walked off another walk in extra innings. They have a whip of 1.88. That means they're letting up almost 2 batters on base every single inning. I know that they played Miami, who's good, and I know they just played UVA, who's really good. But that's only 6 games out of 18 at this point. BC has just replaced their pitching coach after last season. They also replaced another coach on Gambino's staff. Now, if you follow coaching staffs in any sport, what is usually the predecessor of the head coach being removed? It's when they replace his underlings and they still continue to fail. That usually means that there's something not working at the top, and that means a change needs to be happening. When BC baseball, they are now 7-11, 1-5 in conference, and they don't look, in the games that they've played in conference, they don't look resembling competitive in most of the games that they've played. At what point is Pat Kraft going to have to pull the trigger here? And I think it's going to be this year. I think it's got to be. If they're going to play like this, if they're going to have a pitching staff that has an ERA that's, 8 plus. Anything above 5 is really bad. They're at 8. That just shows you how poorly the pitching staff is going. But this is something that happens it seems like it's happened every year since they had that Sweet 16 run. So It seems to me, if you're talking about which coach is going to go, it's none of the guys that we talked about before. It's going to be Mike Gambino. I gotta imagine they're gonna move on him at some point, unless something drastically changed. Now, to his credit, his hitters are insane. He's got a great hitting. He's got some real live bats in that lineup. But man, that pitching staff is tough to watch. So in a moment, we're gonna have Mitch Wolfe on, and we'll talk about actually how to pronounce the new tight end's name. And it's our favorite conversation, talking about tight ends here on Locked On Boston College. We'll be back in just a moment. Now it's that time of year again as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. Before I started recording this segment, just a quick little news note. Chris Markwood, Boston College assistant coach for the men's basketball team, was just hired, or reportedly hired. John Rothstein's reporting it, and he's usually gold. That the Maine Black Bears hired him. Now he's a former Maine basketball player. Is from the area. Good hire for him, and we'll talk more about this in a future episode. But I wanted to make sure that I addressed it because it was news. Now with me, I have Mitch Wolfe, and Mitch is here to talk about the biggest joke on this podcast is that I talk about BC football tight ends way too much. But it's a fascinating position, and BC has a new tight end that looks to be a big time player, hopefully heading into the season. So Mitch, let's talk a little bit. How you doing?
I'm doing good. This was a fun player to break down. It was a little difficult. It was a little difficult to break him down just because it's a little harder to find a lot of film on him. But once I got into it, he's a very interesting player to break down. I'm excited to talk about how he can fit into the offense this year.
Now, did you find when you were looking at the film for Notre Dame that you just started watching Michael Mayer film more often than anything? Or
it is hard to take your eyes off him. He is certainly a sight to behold, and luckily when if Takacs wasn't on the field and Mayer was, I would just skip past those plays so I didn't get bogged down too much. But yeah, he's quite the talent, and you can see why Mayer, a younger player, an underclassman, was getting the majority of the snaps over an upperclassman like Takacs.
Now, I've read a bunch of Notre Dame sites. I talked to Brian Driscoll of Irish Breakdown, part of the same network that BC Bulletin is part of. And the overwhelming theme I hear is, class player, good character guy with high potential. What did you see in some of the film that you might agree with that, or where you're kind of thinking where this guy might fit well in BC's system?
So I'll address that by saying that if you look at his stats, you're going to be disappointed just because there really aren't any. And that's just a matter of he was stuck behind several tight ends that went to the NFL in Alizé Jones or Mack, depending on which year he was, Cole Kmet, Brock Wright. He was in the same recruiting class as Tommy Tremble, and then Michael Mayer, as you mentioned, came in. So that's a bunch of NFL talent that, it's just hard to get on the field with all those guys. And he looks very much like for lack of a better word, the average Notre Dame tight ends of the last 15 years or so, the Brock Wrights, Ben Koyaks, Durham Smythes, and Troy Nicholases, not the dynamic athletes of like a Tyler Eifert, even a Kyle Rudolph. So, but Takacs is a solid player. This was his first season where he really got significant playing time. He more than doubled his snap count this past year relative to the previous 2 seasons combined, but he still only earned 4 targets on about 407 snaps, which was the same number he got the year before. So they primarily used him as a blocker, and Notre Dame's offense, like BC's last year and definitely in years prior, uses a lot of multi-tight end sets, a lot of 12 and even 13 personnel, mostly to keep Mayer on the field. And then, if you want to run the ball, you bring in a guy like Takacs. And the thing that I liked the best about him was his ability to get outside and block in space. So if they ran the ball outside, or were running kind of a read option with a tight end pulling, or they had to get him blocking in space for a screen, I really liked his ability to do that, to take out linebackers and defensive backs in the second and third levels. So that's something that I'd like to see BC do a little more of this upcoming season. He's a solid inline blocker. I would I was actually watching some BC film from last year, and I think he's actually a better inline blocker than Joey Luchetti is, which that'll be interesting to see. It's hard to really grade him as a receiver just because he gets so few opportunities. And his route tree is pretty limited. It's all pretty much snag routes or stop routes or stick routes over the middle of the field. His route tree is very Jason Witten-esque in terms of it's just run to a spot and turn around and wait. And he just wasn't a priority in the Notre Dame's offense. He was like the 5th or 6th option just based on like who they were trying to get the ball to on any given down. So, you can say that's not really his fault. You can say, oh, it's because he wasn't good enough. And, that's both are true to an extent, but I think he fits in well to what BC is going to be trying to do in the next few seasons.
Yeah, and it sounds like the potential is there for him to be a pass catcher. Right? From what I've heard, is it's a skill he has. He's not like a guy that's just going to be like a Louis Adazio, guy that's just
no, he's not a Louis Adazio or Mike Giacone. He's not that limited. Like he's still he's pretty close to Tommy Sweeney. I would say a little less athletic than Tommy Sweeney was. But it seems like his hands are good. He runs decent routes. He's not going to be like a Trey Berry or Hunter Long. That's a super great receiving tight end that you can line up anywhere, but he can play in the slot. He can play on line of scrimmage. He can play off the line of scrimmage. You can do a lot with him, but he's not going to be this, dynamic game changing player. But I like that him and Luchetti are pretty similar players. So they can be kind of interchangeable in the two kind of tight end roles that BC would like to use.
Yeah. And it sounds like I've heard some of what McNulty is saying, and he's going to continue a lot of that. As you said, 1-2, maybe some 1-3 offensive game, offensive plays. So, having a Luchetti or a Spencer Witter with Takacs will probably be a great fit for BC. And, I don't think you want to go into a season with, if you're going to do a lot of 1-2 with Luchetti and Witter as your two guys, because that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like you're playing to your strengths there. I mean, they're both the kind of I don't know. I'm kind of just speaking off the cuff here, but like, I don't see either of them as strong pass catchers. Luchetti was fine. Spencer Witter's had some moments, but like it would be quite the precipitous drop off compared to what they've had in previous seasons.
Yeah, and I was excited to get a look at what Charlie Gordinier was going to do before Takacs came in, but I still think that they'll get him some snaps this year. But I think it'll be interesting in that if they do roll out with 12 or 13 personnel, it's not a given, if it is pass play, that which tight end it's going to go to. Like it could realistically be to either one. And then obviously you have receivers like Zay Flowers and Jalen Gill that are going to draw a lot of attention. So with those other guys, the tight ends and Takacs to that extent, there should be a lot of open space for him to run in the middle. And like I said, I'd be really interested to see how they use him and Luchetti as blockers in space, trying to get the ball to the receivers on screens and RPOs and stuff like that.
All right, Mitch. So this was a quick one today. This is our Monday with Mitch segment. We moved to the end of the segment, end of the show today. But Mitch, is there any other things you wanted to bring up today?
No, nothing really for me. You can follow me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. I'm kind of going through my the BC guys this week. They're the pro days on Friday, so we'll recap that on next Monday's show. But so I'll be posting some clips of the plays that the BC guys make. So yeah, just make sure to follow me there.
All right. Thank you, Mitch. And you can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC or the podcast at Locked On BC. Make sure to follow us on YouTube as well. If you've listened to us on our podcast and you like it, just throw a subscription our way on YouTube. It's totally free. You probably all have a subscription already signed up. If you use YouTube for anything, you have it. So just find Locked On Boston College, hit subscribe. It helps us a ton. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more. Well, I said we'll talk about that Chris Markwood news. Look at more news that's going on around the world of BC football and everything in between. Thank you all and see you again soon. Take care.